I actually don't believe that there's going to be full-fledged war. And again, I have a minority opinion. If you go on the news, most of the opinions are there's going to be, but I think there's, including Russia, there's more to lose by doing that than they have to gains. They're not stupid. We might not. They might not. They might have a. They might be commies, but they're not stupid. Yeah, share. Share. What's so funny? Come on, Derek. All right. So Thursday seems like a long time ago to me. I don't know about you. I guess I had an extra long weekend with a flooded basement. I'll tell you, still going on. There now. World War II, a quick summary. Okay, we devoted 2 full slides of notes to this man, not because he's anything special. Well, he's about because I learn history. We don't ever want a person, a single person like this, with evil intentions and evil desires to ever rise to such a place where they can have that much prominence and power, right? So since the 1930s, after World War II, something that was developed that took over for that League of Nations we talked about, President Wilson, and the idea behind that is to create all these relationships with all the countries. All the countries will regularly meet together. That way, there'll be open dialogue. We'll never have a situation like we had in World War II. Yes, that's the goal, right? And some people, again, going back to what's happening today, worried about World War III. What if Russia does this? First they took that, now they take that. It's almost like we said with Hitler. First he took this, then he took that, then he took that, and the rest of the world's like, hey, you better stop that. And then what happened? Again, I don't believe that that's going to happen. So you're taking right now a photographic picture with your eyeballs. So when the test comes, you're like, that was Mein Kampf. That's what it was. I could see it, Riley. You could see Mein Kampf in your mind's eye when that test is in front of you. You could picture the screen on the wall, and you could picture even where it was in your notes. See what I'm saying, Trey? Any questions? Hitler. Just to reiterate, his slow rise to power, well, slow to him, we look back at history, 2 years went by like that, right? But to him, it was a slow rise until he becomes the Führer in 1934. Then we talked about Mussolini in Italy, who was kind of a, if not definite mentor to Hitler. Hitler definitely looked up to and saw what he was doing in Italy and said, that's the kind of leader Germany needs. A person with all the power. Do you think America needs that? Right?
Can you repeat what you just said?
Hitler looked at Mussolini and how he took over Italy. And again, if you look at these men and ask them, were they doing good? What are they going to say? Yes. And if you look at some of the things that they did with the economy, they could say, I was successful. You with me? We don't look at it that way. America, or the world that has come to embrace freedom over the last 200 plus years, we don't look at success as being just economic. We look at successful life being free. Freedom comes before any economic gain. Well, that's the way it's been for 200 some years. Some might say we're kind of teetering on the brink right now as we speak with your generation coming into adulthood. What is your generation going to choose? Are you going to choose to continue to have freedom be the most important factor in life, in your life, in your future family life? Or is economic convenience going to be your most important factor? Because these tyrants, in a lot of cases, did a lot to ease people's economic situation, but took away their freedom of speech and their freedom to protect themselves. and the freedom to pursue whatever it is they felt, what the talents God gave them to pursue those things in life. Are those things important? Obviously, I think they are. And the overwhelming motivating factor to why do I do what I do is to try to impart that love for freedom and to protect that liberty that we've been given and all the blessings that we are given because we live in the greatest country in the world, that they just won't be forgotten, and that you'll take the mantle and pass that on to your children and grandchildren, so that my grandchild, right now just one, I can be assured if the Lord takes me now, that he'll be able to live in a place called America. It's free. Make sense? Not to be too somber, but that's the truth. So we need to be looking out for these types of people, that this never happens again. Because how did it end? In doom. Might look rosy for a while. They might accomplish their so-called goals in the short term, but in the long term, it leads to misery. That was Mussolini. What do you call that thing? Fascist, right? That's the actual symbol of power, where they get the term fascist from. And if you weren't familiar before with the term fascist, you all heard of communist, you've all probably heard of a socialist. Well, communist, socialist, fascist. Are they three different things? Yeah, kind of, but they're all part of the same branch, right? There's this tree of tyranny, this tree of governments that rule with an iron fist. So they're all part of that same lineage. They all have to do with imposing government power, maybe in slightly different ways, but they're all part of, some people would put them all in one umbrella called statism. The state controls everything. You're not in control of your life. God's not. I mean, listen, the first thing that has to go is this, your dependence, and this idea that God is sovereign and in control. God's not in control of your destiny. You're not in control of your destiny. That is the responsibility of the state. And unfortunately, for a large percentage of people, they like it that way because they favor security over liberty. And where does that lead in the end? What does history teach us? What does history teach us when people forego liberty for the sake of some security, even economic? Disaster, suffering. And then this Tojo guy, probably never heard of him before last week, and what he was able to do in Japan with his ultimate authority. You talk about ultimate authority. This guy is the leader of a place where they think their emperor is God, and he's the main guy that not only protects that emperor, but protects the idea that everything we do has to be in honor and pay homage to our emperor as God. And he's in control of the military. You talk about a guy with superpower. And the things he did leading up to World War II. And then Stalin, some of you probably heard the name Stalin before, but you might not have known until last week that Hitler's the face of evil in the 20th century. But most academicians, most historians would tell you that more people died under the iron fist of Stalin than did under Hitler. Depending on, and again, you go back just a couple generations, you're living in a digital age where the government records of you already are somewhere that they have all the information. Just 2 generations ago, there weren't those records, right? So when you look back, you read one history book, it might say 20 million people were killed under Stalin. You read another history book and they'll say, well, 12 million people. So you're like, who do you believe? Is one of them lying? Not necessarily. They're getting their information from different places and it's not all digitized. You can't just go to a computer and say, hey, this is a record that was kept by Stalin of all the people killed. There's no such thing, right? So you'll read in one place up to 20 million killed by Stalin. You'll read in another place up to 12 million killed by Stalin. You won't read anywhere that says 2 million were killed by Stalin. Or I shouldn't say killed directly, died under the heavy hand, the iron fist of Stalin. So whether it was 12 million or 20 million, How much difference does that make to you, Noel? Is 12 million enough? I mean, is that enough to tell of the how much suffering there was under this guy? Right? 20 million? I think 12 is sufficient, isn't it? To get an idea of what life was like under the iron fist of these tyrants. And then we how the war began. And we're getting close to where. What's the last thing in your notes? Oh, we did. So we watched the video. Then we got to look at these leaders and the phony war in Dunkirk. By the way, you can imagine probably. I was going to say maybe next to like his child being born, but the kind of guy he was, this was probably better. I think the exact date was June 22nd, 1940, when Hitler sees the leader of France have to sign a piece of paper surrendering Paris and all of France to Germany. If you remember World War I, how the Germans in shame had to surrender at the in the forest there. Just lost the name of the forest. You guys remember it? Ardennes Forest, where they had to sign the armistice. Remember, November 11th at 11 o'clock, where the Germans had to sign their surrender and shamefully in their eyes have to admit that they were defeated by France. And that was the end of World War I, and they took all the blame. Probably the most incredible moment of Hitler's life was when he, on June 22nd, 1940, when France had to surrender to Germany. And Germany took over all of France. So Germany has taken over all of these countries. First they annexed, come on, don't look at your notes. Austria, very good. First they annexed Austria. These Germanic-speaking people who had people in their government that were already Nazi-friendly. Easy. It wasn't a war. They just annexed them. Hey, you're part of Germany now. Yay. They had parades, right? Then Hitler said, hey, there's this piece of land to our east in a country called Czechoslovakia called the Sudetenland. Very good. And it really should still be part of Germany. You know, the way that Franco-Prussian War ended 70 years prior to this, 60-some years prior to this, that really wasn't right. We just want to, it's basically Germanic people. We don't really want to have a war over it. We just think it should be part of Germany. Okay, but you promise that's it? So he takes the Sudetenland. And then, hey, this is going pretty well. I got Austria, I got the Sudetenland. I wonder what they would do if I just went ahead and took all of Czechoslovakia. They didn't do much. So then he says, oh, well, you know, there's a lot of German-speaking people in Poland. I mean, really, Germany kind of has a right to at least part of Poland, too. Again, going back to, there was an area of the world called Prussia. So going back to the Franco-Prussian War, now by this time the world, when I say the world, France and Great Britain, especially the two powers in Europe, are like, okay, that's it. You got to stop. So they meet with Hitler and probably promises to stop, right? But then he says, I'm just going to go. It gets he made a pact with what other country on the other side of Poland? Russia, right? So he had the German-Soviet pact, and Russia and Germany go into Poland. So now he takes Poland. Well, that's it. Now we're at war. So not that you should be worried about it. You should pray for your leaders in your country all the time. But some people then that are all frightful about what's happening now, they're like, huh, if we don't learn from history, if Putin takes, first he took this, you may have heard this word before, Crimea, which is this piece of land here, right there at the Black Sea. If 8 years ago he took that, and the world, and America is always involved in these things because we're the superpower of the world, and we have a lot of interest, especially economically in most parts of the world. And in 2014, he kind of just took over Crimea, which is part of Ukraine. What? And our leader at that time didn't really do much about it. And now he says, just yesterday, well, I'm just going to go into this eastern part of Ukraine. I'm doing it to keep peace. So if he keeps going, where do we end? Having said all that, yours truly, again, there's too much to lose. I don't think it's going to go full-fledged. So you shouldn't be sitting around worrying about World War III. This is what I'm trying to say. But you should always pray for your country and your leaders. But the comparison is Putin's not Hitler, at least I don't think. So, but if you look at how World War II started, where does he end? Because if he's able to take Ukraine, would he want to take back, quote unquote, all of the other now independent countries that were once part of the Soviet Union? Did you know that about recent world history? There was this Cold War between the United States and, we call them Russia, but there was a USSR. Okay, so you've learned that the Soviet Union used to be much more than Russia. It was Latvia, Lithuania, Estonia, Ukraine, Georgia, Belarus, all these other countries that are now independent. Well, a guy like Putin, he's an old Soviet. He would love to take over all of that territory again. You with me? We think the Cold War ended 30 years ago. Putin doesn't think so. He's like, he would love to get that back. Having said all that, I still don't believe it's going to happen. Too much to lose. All right, ready? So France is gone. Jake, this thing just started in September of 1939, right? 9 months later, Hitler's got France. He's got the Netherlands, Finland. He's got like almost all of Europe already. There's one great power that he hasn't conquered yet. So Hitler is now going to fix his eyes on Great Britain. I mean, imagine, think about it. If Hitler gets Great Britain, if he's got France and Great Britain, game's over. All of Europe is now going to be under the rule of Hitler. And is he going to stop there? Why would he stop there, right? Why would he stop there? This megalomaniac who has a desire to create a whole race of people, the perfect race, to get rid of all of the inferior races. He's not going to stop at Europe. You understand what's at stake here, right? So you might think right now, like, hey, we're over here in the United States. What do we care about what's going on in Europe? Well, back then we had to care. I mean, if the guy takes over all of Europe and we learn what his actual goals are, at some point America's going to have to intervene. You with me? So anyway, if he gets Britain, the game's over. He's on his way to world dominance. So what do we call that type of warfare Germany like to use? Blitzkrieg. So his goal is he's going to fly over that English Channel and he's just going to absolutely bombard day after day, hour after hour, just all out assault from the air on Great Britain. The Luftwaffe, by the way, is the name of the German Air Force. That's a term you have to know for the test. The Luftwaffe, that's the name for and the German Air Force, totally ready for war. Other air forces in Europe, not necessarily. Again, you got to go back to the idea that Germany was the one that was most prepared for the war because this was their goal. That was goal to take over all of Europe. Now, Great Britain's got they're in a much better place than France was and any other country in Europe. Britain has a strong, very strong, proud heritage going back to their Royal Navy, back when they defeated the Spanish. Good. I was looking at you before you got there. I knew you were going to know the answer. The Spanish Armada back in 1588. Great Britain's a long, proud history of their military strength. So they are much more prepared than other European countries. So their Royal Air Force, maybe not as ready as Germany, but they're going to come through. So for months, starting in July, August, September, imagine you're a school kid in Great Britain. School starts in September. And instead of having a tornado drill that we would normally have, or a fire drill, you're constantly under the, like, not just threat, the actual bombings going on. Are you even in school? I wonder how many days they went to school. Because you don't know, is today the day that the Luftwaffe comes over your neighborhood and drops thousands of pounds of bombs? With me? That's what was going on for several months, summer into fall of 1940. Well, here was the problem for the Germans. Drew, the Germans were prepared, right? They're sending hundreds of their fighter jets over Great Britain, dropping all these bombs. The only thing is, they were doing it in daylight because, of course, you have to do it in daylight, right? Their technology isn't sophisticated enough to carry this out at night. They got to be able to see their targets. So they're flying over. Well, the Royal Navy, the Royal Air Force, was in defense mode, and in the first part of the Blitzkrieg, while they were bombarding Great Britain, they were also suffering heavy losses. They lost 3 times as many airplanes as the Brits did. So are they being successful? Yeah, because they are bombing Great Britain to the point that they're doing a whole lot of destruction. But on the other side of that, they're losing a lot of their planes from ground fire and the Royal Air Force. And they end up losing way many more pilots than the Germans do. So the German Blitzkrieg is inflicting heavy damage on the cities of Great Britain. But the Royal Air Force, in the meantime, is bringing heavy losses to the Luftwaffe. Does that make sense? So who's winning? Maybe Germany's winning in the short term because they're doing all this damage, but because they're suffering so many losses, in the long run, it might not be that good. Hey, does anybody remember from world history what you might call the kind of victory Germany was having at the very outset? Pyrrhic.
Sure.
Yeah, there were the Punic Wars, and then there was that Pyrrhic victory. Good job. Pyrrhic victory. That Pyrrhic victory, if you remember from world history, is the kind of victory you get when you win, but you suffered so much loss that it actually hurts you in the long run. Does that make sense? Does that come back to anybody now? Pyrrhic victory. The sophomores that had world history last year. No? Can you come back, Pyrrhic? Yeah, you know.
Because I was in world history.
Oh, no, that's right. You're a freshman. Sorry. No wonder you're staring at me like, he's not really thinking. I know that, is he? All right. Okay, so Drew, because they were doing all this in daytime, Germany decided, you know what? We're just going to go to night bombings. We've got our, as they're flying across, you imagine they're taking pictures, right? So they've got kind of mapped out the places they want to bomb. So they're going to try their efforts at, let's go into night bombing. So now imagine you're growing up in Great Britain. All right? Now, how are you going to sleep? Right? Mommy, are they going to bomb our house tonight? I mean, honestly, literally, that would be like, right? I mean, these are constant air raids. So they changed their tactics into night bombings. By the way, they call this the Blitz. So there's Blitzkrieg type warfare, lightning warfare, and the Battle of Britain, the Germans called it the Blitz. Both of those are in italics because it's not just Blitzkrieg, it's the Blitz, the raid on Great Britain. By the way, why are they doing this? Why aren't they just going across the English Channel with their navy or in Europe? the Blitzkrieg was, I kind of threw it. One was the bombings. Can you think of the other ones? What are the other two parts to the Blitzkrieg? It's not just the bombings from the air. What else? Okay, so while you're bombarding them, no one in the world has ever seen before, literally. You've got war, by the way, World War II. You know, it's like there were planes in World War I, but not to this extent. This is like, this war is going to be like no other war in history. Constant bombing from the air. You've got ground troops rolling in. You're sending paratroopers behind where the ground troops are coming in. Okay, that country's going to, hey, we got to stop these people. You got paratroopers dropping behind. This Blitzkrieg, it was supposed to be an all-out assault, quick victory, right? Well, you got the English Channel. On the air raid, right? You've got a Royal Navy that's strong. They're gonna make sure that you can't get there that easily. So what Germany was hoping was by the most intense air raids in the history would bludgeon Great Britain so badly, what would they do? Surrender. That the damage would be so bad that they would break the will of the people and begging their leaders. By the way, leadership's going to change hands from the, what was that word start with A? To keep peace. What is it? Two P's, APP. It's meant to keep peace. Appeasement. That leader, Neville Chamberlain, the great appeaser that was not trying to stop Hitler to begin with, he's out. Winston Churchill's in, and we'll get to Churchill probably tomorrow, but one of the reasons Britain's going to persevere is because of the great leader Churchill. So here's the difference. If you grow up and you learn history of you, the Germans are going to say the Battle of Britain lasted from July to May because they're going to continue. Obviously, they couldn't keep up the same pace, but they're going to continue, even though the pace slows down, with their air raids of Britain. If you read history, when they started bombing Great Britain, they didn't just go right to Jake's house and say, we're going to take out the Walker family. That wouldn't make any sense. They started with, we're going to find their military bases. We're going to bomb their military bases. Makes sense, right? They're not going to use their bombs on civilians. Then they go to factories. First, you're going to take out any tactical weapons that the enemy might. Then you're going to take out infrastructure, which means the factories that are building these weapons the enemy might have. And if that doesn't do the job, in Germany, they then stay where schools. By the way, one of the other things about the history of war, especially when it comes to the United States being involved in wars and how countries try to get together and kind of sounds weird, but make rules for war. I don't know if we talked about it in here, Geneva Convention, where they come, they say some things you're not allowed to do in war. Well, the United States does their absolute best to adhere to all that, and if at all possible, fight even war morally. Like you don't bomb schools, you don't bomb hospitals. Well, guess what the enemy knows? America would never bomb a school or a hospital. So what do? They call them hospitals and use them as their headquarters. That happens all the time, especially in this century with the war on terror. Evil doesn't play by the same rules that we do. But the Brits persevered, and the Germans planned ground invasion. They are never able to finish what they started. Their plan was to bombard them into oblivion and make them so weak that they go. The Battle of Britain 19. If it wasn't for Winston Churchill, we could be speaking German. Literally, I mean, that's not an exaggeration. I mean, if you think over all of Europe and his ideas to build the human race, some of you wouldn't even be here. When I was a kid, I'd be like, yeah, I'm blonde hair. I'm more Aryan, so. I feel pretty good about that. I'd still be here.
You can survive it.
You see? You see that? You are-
My bro. No, you're not. Let's say,
Shut up, all the way.
You gotta